welcome. Welcome to this edition of AARC's Artist Talks. I am so excited for you. I am so excited for everyone in the room, the Zoom room, because we are going to be learning about two amazing artists. They're so inspiring. I'm so privileged and so excited that I get to work with them. Their names are Loc Huynh and Zoe Watts. My name is Rachel Stewart Chabra, and I work for the Asian American Resource Center, where I get to be the exhibit specialist. A little bit about what we do at the Asian American Resource Center. We are a cultural, community, and arts center located in Austin, Texas. We're a City of Austin site, and we are part of the Museums and Cultural Programs Division of the Parks and Recreation Department. We are located in East Austin, east of I-35 on Cameron Road in the City of Austin. We're currently not open to the public. We're still waiting to hear from the powers above to give us the go-ahead to open our doors. We hope that when we're able to open again, that you all can come visit us in person. But for now, thank you so much for coming to this event, this virtual event. And I'd really like to know where everybody's visiting from. So if you could go ahead and chat in the chat there, where you're visiting from, your city, your state, your country. Welcome to everybody. So we're about to hear from our artist here in a second. The first artist that we're going to be hearing from is Zoe Watts. Amazing. One of the things I really love about her art is that she is fully a conceptual artist. I have a soft spot for conceptual art. Her art is so deep and so meaningful, with so many different concepts and mediums, and the way that she approaches so many different important ideas about identity, about politics, about architecture and art, and the way that she's able to weave all of these different concepts together. I really love it. Coming soon to an in-person exhibit at AARC, we're going to be seeing her exhibit, Me, She, Jen, Lost Between by Zoe Watts. So she's an artist, a teacher, a costumer, a boulderer enthusiast. She lives in Austin, Texas. They combine their background in sculpture and study of installation art with questions of whether identity can be site-specific. They use their perspective as a Chinese adoptee. They integrate their form with art history, design, social conversation, and they discuss themes of belonging and the complications of navigating intersectional identity. So let's hear from Zoe.
Hi, y'all. I'm gonna share my screen with y'all. I'm a little sick today, so I think that looking at my face is not gonna be the best thing. So let me do that really quick. So I'm gonna just read my statement. Rachel touched on it a little bit. But my work examines identity, intersectionality, and race in America from my perspective as an adoptee, through the combined use of Western and traditional Chinese aesthetic elements. In an effort to become more aware of how and where I fit in, I've created an accumulation of perspectives in order to visualize how an individual can be part of a culture by definition, but feel significantly separated from it, and look at experiences and interactions in my life and how they make me question both sides of my identity. The Chinese side, one that I feel inherently connected to because of the ways in which physical appearance has affected the way people perceive me, and the immersion in American culture, which has assigned to me the way in which I view the world. Adoptee stories and emotions are often told and interpreted by those who aren't adopted or are part of the adoption industry. And in dispelling those false narratives, I want to highlight how intersecting identities, language, and the influence of cultures other than your own can change the way a person sees themselves and others around them. In my work, I use metal and mixed media to create structures that contain images and insight from different points in my life. The context is based on my experience in America and China, where the structures are based on architecture and sculpture from my birthplace. The building of my identity shows in these literal themes and structures, just as the encounters in my life clearly define how my sense of self has developed over time. So this is one of the images that I took, one of the first image, actually the first photo I took when I was in China on my first visit back. It was at a temple that had been kind of like converted into a tourist spot, and that was something that I wanted to kind of take into account, because this, like, I was going back to my home place as a tourist, and that was something that was like really interesting to me. This is a shot of my gallery show from my university, but I just wanted to share this to just talk about how the setup of the show was like mattered, and I wanted to connect all three pieces, having the beginning being guarded by these ceramic lions, which are used to guard like cities and temples, and then kind of unfolding as you go farther back, and tops, and then overhead are these clouds that I cut out of wood, and have the shadows are projected over the structures in like multiple places. The first piece I want to talk about is the one that's representative of my coming to America. It features images from different Chinese cultural sites around Austin, whether that be the Asian market or the Buddhist temple that we have up north, and just places that I went to and traveled to and visited, like growing up in Austin, and were sites of different cultural festivals, Chinese New Year's, and like the lunar festivals and the Dragon Boat festivals, things like that. I did Chinese dance when I was a kid, so I performed at many of these places. Whoops! Whoa! Never mind. Just kidding. I don't know how to do technology. Okay. So this was like my first introduction to Chinese culture. So yeah, that's what those images are. That's what the structure is. The second one that I wanted to talk about is this this structure that's my Chinese name, Wu Yuzhen. They are the images are taken by friends and people from my class in university. I had them tell me what to wear, how to pose, what to do. I was interested in how other people perceived me and wanted me to present myself, and that's what I did with this one. This is just a detail of the clouds because I took a long time making those, and I was really proud of them at the time. After college, I started working on some personal stuff during the coronavirus pandemic. I and my fellow Asian Americans experienced an uptick in racism, and so I did this self-portrait project where I took photos and paired them with quotes and conversations that I had had with people in my family on the street, and it was an effort to kind of reclaim some of the feelings that I was having at the time, both about the social conversation and like my own I don't know, like journey of figuring things out post grad. And then now I'm working on, I don't have images of these because they're still in progress, but I've started getting into stamp carving and also jewelry making. Anyway, I wanted to just get that out there and open it up to questions, because that's like the majority of what I want to talk about and like want this presentation to be. So yeah, if anyone has questions.
Yeah, I would
Like,
like to add that we want this to be very interactive, and we really want the community here to join the conversation. If you have any questions for either of the artists during their talk, or you have feedback that you want to give them, they definitely want that. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we'll maybe be able to use them in the program.
yeah. So yeah, that's just kind of the general like overview. When I started my college capstone, a huge part of it was this interview process that I did. I talked to over 200 adoptees, about 60 to 70 of them from China. Otherwise, and then the other ones from South Korea, Vietnam, a couple from Thailand, and just did just did interviews with these people where I talked about their experiences and their adoption story, and it was really eye-opening and also kind of cathartic to like speak with other people and learn their stories, and also know that like I wasn't necessarily alone in my experiences. That was, and I yeah, so that's part of like, that's like the main part of that capstone
I love
research.
that aspect about your work, that it's crowdsourced. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you have any stories about the friends and the people who your classmates that you worked with when they did that project where they were kind of suggesting poses for
Yeah.
you, or things to wear? Is there any like memories that you made that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like the people that I reached out to were like, why did you choose me? Like and I was like, it wasn't, based off of really like anything in particular. I just wanted like a diverse group of people, and varied group of people. And so I allowed them to kind of interpret. I'll share the screen so that everyone can look at the what I'm talking about. I let them kind of interpret my prompt the way they wanted to. And so some folks asked me to be like, oh, okay, so you identify as like queer, you identify as like Asian, you identify as, whatever. So I'm gonna have you wear like what I would picture that like type of person wearing. And then I had some people be like, oh, like you're just my friend and you're not, that doesn't look a certain way, or being Asian American doesn't look a certain way, so I'm just gonna have you like wear this, and like, which is like an outfit that I wore a lot back then and stuff. So it was just like a way for me to like kind of like, I guess, like find out more about myself and like people's perceptions of me, but in a like comfortable setting, and a more like a place where I had a little bit more agency in a conversation that I like don't usually feel like I do. And then I put the lions there as well, as that kind of representation of like protecting that and guarding that. But I wanna do more sharing as well. So yeah.
That's so interesting. You said you had friends that were like, why did you choose me? I'm wondering if they might have felt like they were on the spot at that moment then to contribute, if they, if they felt, like they could be open and give you a suggestion that, maybe was personal to them, or, if they felt like there was some way that maybe they would give you a suggestion that like, that was, more what you wanted to hear?
Yeah. And I fully like I did like have that part of the conversation with them where I was like, I know this sounds a little weird. And the prompt may be like sound kind of strange, but like I really like my goal is to just like see and just kind of see what you come up with. And I like wanted to make it very clear that it wasn't like there's no like wrong or right answer. And I appreciate those people a lot for taking the time to do that and like be vulnerable with me, because like I think that's like also a lot to ask of them. So yeah.
Right, thanks. So we've got a couple questions from the crowd. Denise
Yeah.
wants to know, was there an outfit that was your favorite or that made you feel different?
Yeah. I think that I wouldn't necessarily say different, but my bet like the one that I remember standing out was just was a friend of mine being like, you wear this shirt all the time, so just put this shirt on and like sit in a chair and I'm gonna take your photo. And that was something that I was like, where I felt like really seen, and like um it just like all of these aspects of my identity like were like they're like a part of me, but I don't like I felt like I didn't need to present them in a certain way. I didn't feel like pressure to um present them in a certain way, because it was just like, ah, yes, this is what you look like. And so that one I remember standing out a lot.
Can you
Thank you so
describe
much
what
for
the
your
shirt
question.
was?
Oh, it's this black tank top. I used to wear, okay, so there was a period of my life in college, through like sophomore to high school or sophomore to junior year, where I wore a black tank top and black jeans and a jean like button up shirt that also served as my apron for painting. And that's like what I wore, just because it was like comfortable and also functional, because we had to wear long pants in the studio, but it was hot. And so, yeah, so that was like just kind of my uniform for a period of time in college.
So you mentioned wearing long pants in the studio. Is that because you're in the metals shop and the
Yeah.
like the sparks that fly and all that while you're
Yeah.
working on the
So when you're
sculpture?
welding, you want to wear denim. We wear a lot of denim, and then we had the leather aprons and the face shields. So yeah, it was part of a safety thing. Long pants, closed toed shoes, nothing polyester, nothing flammable.
Yeah, thanks for describing that. We've got a lot more great questions coming from the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Celia wants to know, she says she would love to know how you feel about or connect the metalworking process within your overall making process.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that's an amazing question. Yeah, so I started doing art like I guess quote unquote professionally in high school, doing jewelry making. And there was something about that really spoke to me. Part of it was definitely me just being like, ah, this is like so cool. I get to work with fire every day. Um, but there's something about the medium that is for me is like you're working with something very rigid and you're turning it into something that can be very fluid or be very structured. Um, and so part of working with that medium is the problem solving aspect and the introspective aspect. And so when I work with metal, I get to like sit down and like plan things out and test things out. And I went through so much scrap metal at my university because I would just like try different things until something happened that I liked. And so, yeah, so I kind of think about the process of making art and 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 like developing my ideas in like a literal way with that medium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah.
I would say that flows really nicely into Sean's question. Sean asks, what is your process in deciding what kind of physical material that you want to work with? Whether it's photos, metal, wood, were there any other materials you considered?
Yeah, so the clouds are made of wood, and then the lions are ceramic. I just love working with my hands. I like doing like physical things. I tried doing digital art for a period of time, and I just like could not do it. I could not sit in front of a screen. And then the photography was even kind of a stretch too, because I like went through and like was going through all these photos and like I think I remember for my capstone, I remember taking a day, like all those photos in Austin. I like just drove around Austin for a day and like got them all out of the way, and then like filtered through and edited like over 600 photos. Because I was just like, I want to get this out of the way, and I want to get the like hands-on crafting part. I want to get to that. Yeah, so I think part of that like the choice to use metal was because of that, that like hands-on exploration. And yeah.
So Maddie wants to know if anything surprised you throughout this process.
Yeah, so when I was interviewing, I told everyone I had like a little spiel, and part of that was talking about my art and like what I was doing and like how their stories were gonna fit into this. And I was really surprised at like the number of people who um were like who had never like talked about identity before, and never considered like identity um as something that could like connect them with other people. And that's not to say that they hadn't like experienced things like related to identity, or thought about like who they were or anything, but just as like a kind of like broader like community concept. And like what I mean by that is just that when I was like, since I was adopted, like I had some cousins that were adopted, and I was part of FCC, Families with Children from China, which was the Austin is or which is like an organization that connects adoptees and adoptive families. And so like I had always like been very aware that I was adopted, been very aware of like met other people who were adopted. There was like, I remember as a kid being in school and like seeing another Asian person and being like, "Are you adopted?" Like just like assuming, because like all of the Asian Americans in my community, like, or in my immediate vicinity when I was a kid, were like also adoptees. And there were people that just like didn't have that growing up. And so it was interesting to kind of see how people's identities were like created with or without that kind of exposure and that kind of conversation really early on in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that. Tracy has a really great question about on the topic of identity. She wants to know how you feel about attending Chinese festivals and dance lessons when you were younger, and was that helpful in finding your identity?
Yeah, thank you. So it's interesting because it like I'm really glad that I did it. But it made me, I remember just feeling like so out of place and like wanting to be a part of this culture and not knowing how. And like I didn't know the language, I didn't know the customs, I wasn't familiar with the food, I wasn't familiar even with like the dances that we were doing. Like our my dance instructor, who was a wonderful person and so kind, and like she was one of the first people who like taught me how to like cook Chinese food, and taught me some Mandarin. She was like so dope. But it was like one of those things where I was like, oh my God, I'm so like out of my element. And it was intimidating because like I felt like I was expected to like know all of these things and like be really familiar right off the bat. And so it was like a mixture of like excitement and also just like feeling like really nervous about it, I think. But like as soon as I did it a couple of times, like it like came really easily to me, I feel like. And I got into it really fast, but it was still like and well, actually, and then like the wake up call was going to China and like experiencing um things there. I went to the a water festival in Xishanbana, which is a area of like southern China, and it's like in the tropics, and there's a minority group there called the Dai, and I was like, I experienced all of this like culture from like a dance cultural like perspective, but then the actual culture and the actual festival is like a little different, right? And so kind of there were like all of these like multi-layered steps to kind of unraveling the kind of the quote unquote like Chinese part of my identity, because it's like I'm coming in it I'm coming at it from like an outside perspective. Yeah.
Wow, that's the tension between feeling like you're an outsider, but you're actually an insider, and you're what is the in between of that? That's
Yeah.
that's very meaningful. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing your stories about that. As you were interviewing other Chinese adoptees and really sort of crowdsourcing this work and learning about all of the different varied experiences that Chinese adoptees have around the world and in other parts of the U.S., or were there any stories that really stood out to you about people that you met through that process?
Yeah. Oh my God, there were a ton, and I definitely cannot like touch on all of them. The ones that I found, like there were so there were a couple of like people that had actually had like really similar stories to me, like did like similar things growing up or in similar groups, like that kind of thing. But then they were like in a different state, and they were in like the like like LA chapter of SCC or whatever. And so like those really stood out to me because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like there are people like me everywhere. And then also some that were like really unique stories. There were some adoptees I spoke to that were like adopted by families in Europe, and they like grew up in Europe. There were a couple of stories of people who were adopted by like families of other races, and so like Black or Latino families, and so they talked about like experiencing like like different like cultures through a like Black lens, or like a like Hispanic lens, and like navigating that as well, and like being Chinese, or in one case Vietnamese, and then like but like speaking Spanish, and growing up in like a Spanish community, or growing up in a Black community and being Chinese. And so like that, like those like really stood out to me, because there's like, I mean, that's obviously something like I don't experience, or I can't like immediately relate to, but I can like empathize with the kind of like cultural like whiplash. And so yeah, so those were some of the ones that I remember like immediately like standing out to me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing about that. That it sounds like
Yeah.
such a prolific process. As you talk about your art and you show us your photos, it really starts to sink in just how prolific, just that even just getting to this point where you have sculptures on pedestals, and they're here for us to see how prolific the work is to get there. One more question that I really want you to talk about is the structure of these sculptures are just so distinct. I'm looking at the photo here on the right and seeing all of those modules balanced on those three very narrow pieces at the bottom, and how they balance. Can you talk about the inspiration for how you came up with this formal quality, and why the modules and why they look like this?
Yeah, so part of the part of what I noticed when I was in China were these like block style housings, and so you have like these like they kind of look like this too. They like fold in very like geometric ways. And then there's a bunch of like tiny little windows, and I was like, that's a sculpture. That looks like a sculpture. And having this idea of like a window into someone's like life. And so I wanted to I'm gonna change the slides over. I wanted to, particularly with the balanced piece, and then the one on the far right, I wanted to reference living structures and homes, and the way that we I'm super excited to have these in like to like in a physical place at ARC, because like I want to like part of it is that you walk around it and you look into it, and there's some things that you can see and some things that you can't, and some things that are illuminated and some things that aren't. And I really wanted to reference this idea of looking into a living space, looking into windows, and talking about how we structure our identities based on our experiences, and how sometimes they're very precarious and sometimes they're very sturdy, and the differences between those, and like what aspects make up different parts of our identity that are maybe more sturdy or more fragile.
Thank you so much for sharing that and describing that so well. I think that comes across in your work so well, and your work is just so effective at dealing with these different concepts that you have going on, and that they're so personal to you. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to hear next from Loc. So hold on just a second. All right. So some things about Loc Huynh. He was born here in Austin, Texas, Austin original. He received a BFA from Texas State University in 2016. He also received an MFA from University of North Texas in 2020. So congratulations on that, Loc. In 2018, he received the Vordman Erdogan Fellowship. Huynh exhibited works nationally in sites including Chicago, New York, Houston, Dallas. The Bemis Art Center and the Lawndale Art Center included Loc's work in charity benefits. Other projects include murals for the Lux Art Center in Lincoln, Nebraska, and San Marcos Nature Center in San Marcos, Texas. He was featured in New American Painting and Glass Tire. He's attended the Vermont Studio Residency, that was in 2017, and he currently is working and living in Denton, Texas. Something that I just love about Loc's work is I've never seen, you know, if you could call it style, if you could call it sensibility, I've just never seen anybody paint quite like this. And the portraits that he has, the moments of people's lives, his own, and also his subjects, especially his mother, there's just this tenderness and this sensitivity to it that really comes across. And I think that he's got an amazing eye for detail in this, and that it's sort of filtered through his point of view, which is so distinct and so unique. So let's hear about his upcoming exhibit. It's currently a web exhibit at AARC, and hopefully we're going to have a physical exhibit soon. It's called Gaman Me, Thanks Mom, and let's hear from Loc.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Rachel.
Yep.
My name is Loc Huynh. I'm an artist, I'm an educator. I do like adjuncting and teaching, and amateur planeswalker. If you play Magic the Gathering, then you know exactly what that is. So here's my artist statement that I wrote out for my grad school that I probably need to change, like, since the development of the work has changed a bit. But through painting, I use materiality to kind of reaffirm the material world, and the vocabulary of images I use is idiosyncratic and purposefully obscured. I draw, my aesthetic kind of evolved from nostalgia and bright colors and just images that kind of harken back to my youth. And I adopt like this kind of persistent imagery because I just am drawn to visual and graphic nature of like cartoons and but also art history. Themes that kind of remain persistent through my work include my Vietnamese American upbringing, social situations like whether it be taking a stroll in the city or being on an awkward date, and personal narratives like being on an awkward date. And by rooting my practice in different visual cultures and art historical references, I seek to kind of extend the meaning of the initial forms of images that may seem familiar and reconstruct them into an entirely new story. So yeah, my work is referential to all sorts of things, but to get to where we are, I'm gonna kind of do almost like a strange history lesson of sorts. So what was I doing prior to art school and going to college? Well, after graduating high school, I kind of thought that maybe I wanted to be a tattoo artist. So I started getting tattooed and hung around tattoo shops, and was kind of drawing and painting like them, like the artist that I was hanging out with. And I was also doing things like designing album covers and t-shirts for like my musician friends, because I often like to joke that, the only reason I kind of got into the art was that I didn't have the musical proclivity to be a rock star, and I really, really sucked at skateboarding. But I kind of was also going to community college though during this time, and after like a certain push from a friend to tell me to kind of like, maybe this art thing could be something worth pursuing, I started my undergrad work at Texas State. And there I kind of fell in love with painting. I kind of originally started as graphic design, but then I took a painting class and it was over. And I haven't looked back since. So kind of my earlier works are kind of these naturalistic oil paintings that are heavily glazed with medium and all that. There's like a million layers on there. And then I did a kind of independent study abroad trip in Italy. And this was during 2016, and it kind of like changed my view on the world, and seeing how crazy politics was at the time, it made me want to do something, take my art in a more politically driven direction. So around 2016, again, like I said, a crazy time. I started doing things like drawing cartoons for my undergrad's newspaper, and I kind of used that language and then put it into my own work and created these kinds of paintings, which are on reverse plexiglass. But and so this is kind of like painted and shaded like a and like a cartoon cell or something like that. So I was taking that language of the cartoons, the political cartoons, but also pairing them with kind of a art, like a history painting context. And this is about the bombing of the Brussels metro that happened that year. And I was also kind of experimenting with the idea of the frame as an object and kind of making these sculptural paintings. So post grad, after graduating, I went to a graduate program in Lincoln, Nebraska. And there it was like hard for me to kind of like find inspiration. So I kind of started looking around at the people there and kind of making work about what I think their lives were. So here, Guy with a Pizza is based on a guy that I overheard like straight up ask a cashier or a grocery store worker where the antacids are, and I couldn't help but see that he had a stack of frozen pizzas in his shopping cart. And again, I started doing these kind of like almost mean-spirited caricatures of like people that I've encountered. But then I went to another program, and I transferred over to University of North Texas here in Denton, and I started kind of like pulling away from the kind of mean-spirited aspect, the kind of grotesque, and kind of started delving into um, more kind of personal and sensitive topics of exploration, while all the while kind of keeping and retaining this kind of geometric and cartoony language. Here's one. And then I kind of started inserting what I saw as myself in these paintings. And the people ask me all the time about like kind of painting myself yellow and stuff. And the blue hair, honest people think it's kind of like a Simpsons reference or something like that, but really it kind of comes to like anything, the racial stereotypes of that Asian people have been portrayed as in media as yellow. And an artist that I was really inspired by was this artist who is a Japanese American, Raja Shimomura. And also he's like one of the very few like Asian American artists that I like could find that like made work that like resonated with me, just because art history doesn't talk about Asian Americans all that much. But yeah, so if anything, it's more of an exaggeration, and the blue hair is my own little challenge of like, how do I like convey the sense of black hair without overtly using black? So then I started kind of like putting myself in these paintings. So what is a Simpsons reference is that I started lifting compositions from the cartoons, and I am a shameless reappropriator. I think that if it's out there in the world, it's free to use. And these paintings were kind of made, during the summer of 2020. So I kind of like was dealing with like themes of the whole isolation kind of phenomenon that we were all experiencing. And then also also during 2020, I got what I felt was bold and started trying to do the whole dating app thing. And that led to some really funny stories. And so, I have like a backlog of these experiences with these women that I've met, and I've kind of asked them if it was okay if I like painted or drew them as part of just to kind of document this again, these awkward interactions. So this was like an interaction of like a date that I had where she came over, and then the cat was being kind of rowdy. And half the time, like a lot of the time, a lot of the time, the women were really receptive, like positively about it. And other times I like didn't hear back, or they were like indifferent, like sure, but why? So yeah, I kind of like, and it's kind of like, again, like it's maybe a bit cliche for like an artist to like paint like someone that they're like I wasn't even in a relationship with any of these women or anything. It was just like a date, but it's kind of like cliche to paint like women that were involved with your life or something. But I don't know, I saw this as kind of like using that language of like Picasso and even the theme, but without the overt misogyny within these paintings. And anything, I was kind of like celebrating that interaction in a kind of a with the kind of kooky and bright colors that I was using. So post grad school, I continued to use myself as a subject for my paintings, just because I had the chance to travel to cities, and I felt like that was a and I kind of painted these during quarantine in a way of kind of like almost immersing myself in these cities without like physically being there, and instead kind of like again almost in a diaristic fashion. And then I proposed the show to the AARC like a couple of years ago now, but yeah, the theme was around my mother. So in a frenzy, I started kind of like painting these portraits of my mom and kind of like just thinking, it's like, man, what is it's like, what's it about my mom that I miss? I'm like, I missed her cooking and I missed seeing her like in the kitchen. So because those were like my most kind of like formative memories of my mother, like seeing her cook like traditional Vietnamese food. And yeah, I also kind of saw these as kind of like um a subversion of kind of the European kind of genre paintings of like Vermeer or like um Rembrandt in a way, but instead of kind of showing this kind of Eurocentric point of view, kind of showing a holistically like Asian American, specifically Vietnamese American like thing. Then I also kind of made narratives of like me and her. Like this is one where she saw my where she saw my first tattoo and was not too great about it.
How did she react to the new tattoo?
Oh, she wasn't happy about it, but she did. One thing she told me was like, I hope that you can cover that up in whatever job you find. And then here I am, like all sleeved.
I love this
What was
painting.
the tattoo?
It was a foo dog, the little lion.
Oh, nice.
Something I love about this painting, and you know, I saw this as while I was working on your marketing materials, and chose it to be one of the primary images that we're using to spread the word about your exhibit, is just how happy you look in this, and the way that contrasts to your mother's expression. And there's an amazing sense of perspective in this, in that the viewer feels closer to your mother, in that she's much larger, and we have her sort of her point of view in based on the perspective. And I just find that you know, the emotion, the tension in this to be so entertaining.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like the fact that these paintings are always kind of like in action or in an act is again a reference to like my interest in like art history and European painting, but without using a European narrative. Um, and so another thing that my mom does other than cook is she loves my dog. I guess it's her dog now, Downey, because his bed's always in the kitchen and he's always there when she cooks. She takes him out for things, so I feel like they are like a good subject matter to paint because yeah, it's kind of like my dog has become this like surrogate child to my mother, and I think it's and kind of like humorous, but also kind of like a nurturing kind of thing as well. Just because like you know, growing up, I just thought my mom was like my mom. I never saw her as nurturing until like I got older and like again saw how tender and sweet she was with this dog.
What kind of dog is it?
He's a long-haired Chihuahua mixed with something.
But just
yeah.
the right size to carry around in your arms like a baby.
Yep, he is. Yep, he is forever a small old man. And yeah, and this kind of latest series of works that I've been making are kind of like I mentioned up the top about kind of delving into nostalgia, and you know, I kind of using nostalgia as a way to kind of paint self-portraits of like me drawing, because I always loved drawing. And wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I thought that it could be like an actual career thing, but I've always been persistent at it. So it's also kind of me like mining those memories for content as well, and things that I was interested in were like dinosaurs and stuff like that. And I kind of got all these like again referenced like the clothes that I wear based on like old family photographs and stuff like that. And yeah, that is my work.
Thank you so much for sharing those inspiring and effective photos, paintings.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if anybody who is in our audience today would like to chat some questions for Loc. Something that I have been wondering about is if you could talk about your process. People are so important to your compositions, and
Mhm.
when you're working with human subjects, are you generally working from imagination, photographs, or in person, like a live model sitting for you?
Mm. Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, when I'm working like from people, I like just I'm like with the women that I met on those dating apps, maybe like I just kind of like remember a glance of like their profile pic, or we met in person and I kind of like just remember. So I'm kind of like working from memory with those. And I'm even kind of working from memory with my mother as well. I kind of just like, um, yeah, I'm kind of always working from memory and kind of like, um, so the way I work is I just kind of do a loose sketch on a and make like a billion thumbnails before I kind of like find one that I really like, and then I just develop that further. And
Mm-hmm.
with this technique, I kind of like to think that it's like, even though my mom, like, she may have like a different nose, or the wrinkles may be in different places, or the mouth may look different, that I still like the fact that it's comes across as recognizably my mom. So I don't know, I take
Mm-hmm.
kind of joy in that kind of like familiar.
So as you describe your process for developing these pictures, something that really comes across super well about your work is this sort of in between memory and imagination, in that
Mm,
our memories don't always tell us exactly what was happening. They tell us our perspective, and especially memories that we had as children. If you can remember what it was like to be a child and see through the eyes of a child, just how different the world seemed, how magical, or how scary it could have been, and just how emotional that world of childhood is. And there's something about your pictures that sort of not only describe the people and the interactions, but also that kind of in between of where was the reality in this memory that I had. How much of it was my childhood imagination or wondering
mhm.
about things, and how much of it was this verifiable hard truth.
Mm. Yeah, I like that, just because like again, like even like things like when I talked about like kind of pulling from nostalgia as kind of a source, and how nostalgia is kind of like not the actuality of like a memory, but kind of like that perception of like what we have of like the past or something like that, and how it's like, that's again, it may not be the most reliable in terms of like the most accurate way of representing, but it also could is a way of remembering something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you talked about sort of making work that was that either referenced or was oppositional to these type of like Eurocentric, genres, Renaissance painting, these like court painters who were
Hmm.
very much in a position to, to flatter their subjects,
Hmm.
and I just wonder, like especially with these pictures of your mother, when she looks at the portrayal of her, how does she feel about it? Does she feel flattered by it? Does she feel, hey, you could have made my hair look a little, more elegant or something? Or does she like this portrayal?
um it's hard hard for me, it's hard to say, because I feel like she likes the way that it looks, but then she's like, oh, that's supposed to be me. And because she's like, do I have that many wrinkles?
Mm,
Or like, yeah, but then it's like, I don't know, I try to make her feel better, but it's like, but someone really wants to buy this painting, mom. And she's like, oh, I guess that's cool too. It's
yeah. Yeah, that's thanks so much for sharing the stories about your mom, and she's definitely so integral to this work, and I think it just comes across so much, like just how much you love her. in the how sensitive and how, just how soft and how tender these pictures of her are. Another thing I'm really interested in is you talked about your sort of primary medium being painting and falling in love with painting, but then also this tool, the airbrush. Could you talk some about what it is about the airbrush that you like?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I first started off being an oil painter, and then I started using and dabbling with acrylics. And it wasn't until like an undergrad that a professor of mine gave me this airbrush set that he wasn't having too much luck with, and then that it kind of like took off there. I actually started using the airbrush quite early on, like even with these pieces, like the kind of fade here is from an airbrush. The only difference with the curtain pieces is like I'm doing it from the back of plexiglass. But I loved the airbrush because of the kind of mechanical look to it, the kind of this this kind of gradient that it can get that makes it look like a paint fill, or makes it looks almost like a computer graphic, and I like that. And I like that I can control the consistency that it makes, very much like digital painting. Um, while like with like oil painting, like you can get the same kind of blend, but it takes a little bit more time. So I like the immediacy and seeing like the instant results of the airbrush. So that's why I kind of like gravitate towards it. And I think it's like a fun tool that also kind of elevates these paintings out of like the, out of the past into like okay, this is a very modernist sensibility. This is a very contemporary like painting. Like you can almost like, you know, um, guesstimate the age or like date the paintings based on like the tools that were being used with them.
Wow, I really love that explanation you gave, especially about the, wanting to incorporate a sense of just the materiality of our current time, and that the airbrush would be integral to being able to date your painting and be able to place it within art history. So thanks so much for sharing. We're reaching near the end of our program tonight. The inspiration that our artists tonight have provided is really something that I think I'll look back on fondly. A couple things to wrap up our program.
Loc, I just wanted to say I love all of the like subversion in your works. I remember just like, yeah, like in like when you go to art school, like you're basically learning about like Western canons and stuff. And so it's like great to be able to see like non-white artists like doing that. And like,
it's good to see a change.
Yeah, definitely.
So Loc is going to be teaching a free DIY airbrush workshop that's coming up on June 24th. He's going to be working with kids age 10 and up and their families. So if you have a young kid, either 10 or a tween or a teen that would be interested in taking this, send them to our Eventbrite page, and they'll be able to sign up there. If you need free art supplies and you're in Austin, we can provide a free kit for you. You would add that on to your registration. Here's the contact information for our artists, their website. So if you're interested in finding out more about them, please go ahead and visit their website. There's Loc's website and Zoe's website. And to find out more about the exhibits that we have at Asian American Resource Center in Austin, here is our website. And something very, very important, please take some time to fill out our survey. We bring these cultural and arts programs to the community for free. These survey responses that we get are like money to us. The feedback that you provide in these, the suggestions that you provide for future programs, and the feedback that you provide about how you liked this program is integral to how we plan our future exhibits and future educational and arts programs. So please take some time to fill out the survey. I'm going to just drop the link to that here in the chat also. Thank you everybody for attending. And a special thanks to our artists.
Yeah,
Thanks
you.
for having
Happy
us.
to do this. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much.
of course. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.